Hello, Timwians. That's not a word. It's your podcast co-host Cheryl here, and I wanted to let you know that today's episode is a part 2 to our episode with Alex. So last week he shared his travel story, we asked him some follow-up questions, and then this week we kind of went in a different direction. And so I hope that you'll listen to last week's episode if you haven't yet, and then please enjoy today.
To India and Ireland, round Africa and back again. We don't really need to know just where we'll go. Maybe Canada, then to Brazil, then through the Alpine foothills. All I really want to know is, can we go? Oh baby, can we go? Round and around the globe.
And my final question, I mean, we typically ask guests if they have any travel questions for us. You probably don't. We're going to go ahead and move on to Wish You Were Here, just wrap up the episode. So thank you for coming. Goodbye.
No, Cheryl, why on earth would you just breeze through that question?
He
Unbelievable.
hijacked our podcast last time, and I'm having none of it. So, okay, fine, Alex. Do you have any travel questions for us?
Well, Cheryl, it's great that you asked, because today I indeed do have some travel questions for you. And in fact, it was your 100th episode that really inspired me for the next segment of the Take Me With You podcast, which is called Cheryl, do a really cool voice in post. Alex's top 10 travel tips plus one. And it'll kind of be like a plus one, like really cool voice, like make it sound really good. No, I loved your 100th episode where you guys talked about some of your favorite travel tips over the years. And I too was inspired to come up with a list of Alex's top travel tips. And but after that, I kind of want to hear some of your guys' top travel tips, because in your 100th episode, you talked about other people's tips that you really, really liked. But I didn't hear about your tips that you really, really liked. And you two, as much as you've heard from other people, are also well-traveled. So that's kind of what I want to hear from you. And I know I'm putting you on the spot with asking your travel tips. So if you want, I could go first. I can give you some time to think, and I can kind of take you through some of my favorite travel tips that I've learned over the years, if you're interested in it. I don't want to take over your podcast or do anything rude like that. So, I completely leave this decision up to you guys.
I'm so excited. Wouldn't it just be your top 11 though?
Well, it's kind of like 10 plus 1, because, in the whole theme of 100 episodes and then doing 10, the 10 by 10, I have 10, but then there was kind of another one that didn't really make the cut, but then kind of was cool too.
It's like a bonus tip.
Okay.
It's like a bonus tip. So all together, we're just going to create Alex, Ryan, and Cheryl's top 15 travel tips.
Awesome. Well, you start.
Okay, got it.
I'm excited.
All right. So I loved the things that you guys actually said during your 10 travel tips on your 100th episode. I think some of those are really, really good. And I was trying to you literally had me sit down after that podcast. You didn't know it, but you guys had me thinking, and it was crazy. So I spent a lot of time thinking about this. And I also, spent a lot of time thinking about how it would sound. So, Cheryl, what you can do is after I say tip number 1, you can put a little sound effect, a little pew pew pew, or maybe a barking dog, whoa, whoa, or something like that. So
I don't know, Alex, you seem to be making your own sound effects pretty effectively.
I'm pretty right. I'm very excited to see what Cheryl does. So travel tip number 1. Oh, that was a good one. So my first travel tip for everyone is to join a rewards program. Anytime you take a flight, doesn't matter whether it's like a 5-minute flight or a 10-hour flight, if you yourself are flying, you are eligible to earn miles for that flight. And I think a lot of the people that I talk to who travel don't really sign up for like the mileage programs. They don't have a mileage number, and a lot of them think, well, I don't travel enough to get rewards, and I don't, you know,
Mm.
if I only travel once or twice a year, what's that really going to do to me?
That's my
But
question.
right. So, but what I would suggest is that even if you travel once a year, those miles start adding up, and you can start getting rewards. Maybe, yeah, maybe you don't fly enough in 2 years to get the round trip to Europe, but you can get like sometimes you can get free meals on planes. You can use miles to get food. You can get miles to get like upgrades for extra legroom. Sometimes you can use miles to check a bag. So it's not always using, the miles to go on some big extravagant location or vacation. Sometimes it's literally like, okay, it costs, 6,000 miles to get me to from LA to Arizona. Like, yeah, that cost $100, but or just by having a mileage number and making sure that you input it every time you fly, uh, that flight could be free. So that's kind of my first tip is like whenever you're flying, there are a lot of partnerships out there. So, like if you fly American, it also, your miles will count if you're flying British Airways or Cathay Pacific or, things like that. But if you kind of have one mileage program for the One World Alliance, which would be like an American Airlines, if you have one for Star Alliance, which would be like your United Airlines, and then you have like a Southwest if you fly Southwest, you pretty much, and maybe a Delta if you fly Delta, you can kind of cover almost any airline route you'll fly in the world, and just start collecting miles. So whether or not you think you use them, my suggestion is sign up for free, get a mileage number with whoever you're flying with, and eventually over time, it might take 5 years, it might take 10, it might take 2, you will be able to redeem those for either magazine subscriptions or
Ooh.
international flights. So that's number one. Don't lose miles. And it doesn't even matter who paid for it. Even if your company is paying for you to fly, you still earn the miles that you fly.
I want to tack on to that one. Can I tack on to it?
Please do. Oh, absolutely.
I'm a part of Alaska Airlines mileage program and have been for years. And a couple of things I've learned, mainly from my dad. He thinks that if you're redeeming miles for a flight, 1 mile should be worth at least 1 penny. So he feels like he likes like to do that to actually like try to get a good value, out of it. But he also told me that one piece is you could use your miles to fully cover a flight, but when you do that, you don't get credit for that flight. You don't get you're not earning miles on the flight that you spent the miles on, but they at least have an option to do partial cash and partial miles. And if you do that, you get the mileage credit for the whole trip. So,
for the whole trip?
Yeah.
Oh, that's like hacking the system right
Yes.
there.
Yeah. So, you can kind of price compare what's just if I paid for this whole trip versus half the amount of money and then half with miles and see if it's worth it or not. But then you get the credit every time. So
Yeah, and that's huge, especially if you're trying to get airline status. Like a lot of airlines, if you fly a certain number of miles per year, you can get status, which will get you priority boarding, free checked bags, lounge access, first class upgrades. Like it's a lot of times people who fly a lot get a lot of these perks. But the nice thing about using miles and money is if you are trying to earn miles for status, it allows you to bank those that way. Where if you just use a mileage flight, I don't think Alaska will count that towards earning any sort of status. So that's number one. join the rewards programs. Make sure you're getting the miles that you fly. All right. Alex's travel tip number 2. Learn how to use Google Flights well. Google Flights is such a powerful tool to figure out the cheapest way or the most efficient way or the most effective way to get from point A to point B. If you only are searching on the American website or the Delta website or the British Airways website, you're only getting that, one specific carrier. But Google Flights searches for, I think, pretty much all the carriers. I don't know if it does Southwest, but
I don't think it does Southwest. I think
I don't
Southwest
think
doesn't let people aggregate theirs, but
yeah. But I think Google Flights is actually better than a lot of the flight aggregators for my favorite feature, which is basically an open destination search. I learned about this a while ago and I stinking love it. So if you go to flights.google.com, and it'll ask you to input some data. Usually it's a origin city, a destination city, and dates. That's typically what these flight aggregators, as well as what Google Flights, will do. And that's how most people look for their travel. They say, oh, I want to go to Rome on these dates. So they'll type in, home city to Rome for specific dates, and you get your results. However, with Google Flights, if you do not include a destination, but you give your origin city and your list of dates, and you click search, what will come up is essentially a map view where all of the available flights will show up with a $sign above them for how much it costs to be there.
Wow.
So for example, if I type in, I am taking off from Los Angeles and I want to go in, these dates in November, I can just zoom in the map to Europe, for instance, and see, okay, well, it's going to cost me $800 to get to Oslo, but only $650 to get to Iceland. It'll cost me $500 to get to Dublin. But, if I wanted to go to Malta, that would cost me $1,200. So what it does is it really allows you to kind of look at all of the different options that you have and the prices that it takes to get there, as opposed to kind of limiting your search for one specific destination city. Now, a lot of people will have specific cities in mind they want to go to, but for, the more adventurous kind of open itinerary people, if you have a week off of work or a week off from school, you're able to kind of input the dates and just see the options and see the prices for all of those options. And I just think that's such a cool place to dream,
yeah.
You see cities that you would have never thought to input as a destination city, but you're like, oh, it only cost me $400 to go here. Well, I've never considered this before, but now Sarajevo actually could be an interesting place.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. What I love about that is it's letting you basically shop based on your budget as opposed to the destination. And not that shopping by destination is bad. That's kind of just our default, but one way to potentially be able to do more travel, right? If your budget is tight or you've only got so much money, instead of picking the destination, look at, I can only spend this much on my flights. This is what I've budgeted. And then you can see what all of your options truly are. And I love that, Alex, of like, hey, I maybe wouldn't have considered this place, but even just in the story that you just told us, right? There were some places that you had no idea what it was. And it was really cool. You had some really cool finds of places that I hadn't heard of all the cities that you had gone to before. So I think that's really a cool way of looking at travel differently.
Yeah. The other part of the kind of Google Flights thing that I really like is you can kind of be specific in some of your search parameters. So, after looking, you can say, okay, well, you can choose how many stops you want. I only want nonstop or only want one stop. My biggest one is duration. Like some of these flights, yeah, it might cost $300, but I don't want a 24-hour layover in Istanbul. It's like maybe I don't have the time to do that. So you can kind of limit the duration of flights that, if you are kind of time constrained, you can do that. The other thing is if you are, if you do have an airline allegiance, for instance, I try and fly One World so that I can kind of get status on One World. You can limit the flight options by which airline or which airline alliance you want to look for. So it's just a really, really cool way to explore all of your options in a very easy layout, and kind of type in the parameters that you want. So whether or not you know exactly where you want to go or are kind of open to any vacation destination, whether it's domestic or international, Google flights, if you know how to do it, and it takes not much time at all to learn, can be a hugely powerful tool just to kind of inform you of the options that are out there.
Cool.
So that's that. Okay. Alex's travel tip number 3. Consider alternate transportation methods. So a lot of times when, especially early on in travel, when I thought about like traveling between towns in Europe or traveling even between towns in the US, I would only really think about planes or trains. What I have kind of, especially with this last big trip that I went on, discovered is there are a lot of ways to kind of get around long distances, whether it's like they have rideshare vans, they have buses. There are a lot of different ways. And so one website that I love to use is called roam2rio.com.
Yes.
Rome, the word, the number 2, rio.com. And essentially what you can do is you can type in wherever you're starting from and wherever you want to go, and it'll populate the different ways to get there. And it'll kind of populate the best it can, the time and the price. And the more I've explored kind of some of these options, the more I've realized that sometimes buses are just the easiest way to go, the cheapest way to go, and the quickest way to get somewhere. So yeah, growing up in Seattle and living in Los Angeles, like buses, people don't really consider as like a great way to get around. Or even in LA, like we have kind of trains and trams, but they don't always go where you want them to go. So especially when going to other cities, that usually isn't the first thing on my mind is, okay, how do I get somewhere? Oh, just hop on a tram. Oh, I need to go to the next city over. Well, there's an easy train that goes there. So that's where I like really would encourage, especially people who are traveling on a budget, is like, consider taking a bus.
Yeah.
Like, I know that buses aren't always the most beautiful things, but you can, especially in a lot of European cities, you can get places really quick on like an overnight bus for very little money. So if you are traveling on a budget, especially, I would, encourage you to look at websites like Rome to Rio to look at ways to get around. Or, I think a lot of times people are scared of rental cars as well. I would encourage you, hey, if you do anticipate quite a bit of traveling, that would be not walkable, maybe it would be good to get a rental car. Or if you're going to a place like Iceland, for instance, you're not really, yes, there are bus tours you can take that go around the island and show you things. But if you want to go at your own pace and you have a group of, 4 people, chip in to get a rental car and you guys can kind of do whatever you want, whenever you want. So that's kind of, it really is like the time versus money consideration where it's like, yeah, you technically could walk anywhere for free, which is awesome. But, trains will get you there faster, but are a little bit more expensive. A car might even get you there faster, but could also be more expensive. So in kind of going into your trip, look at the options that are around if you want to go from, one city in Germany to another city in Germany. If it's an easy bus ride that's fairly safe and cheap, man, I tell you what, that might be the way to go, as opposed to trying to find a train because that's all that you're really considering. Or even sometimes taking the bus is faster than taking a flight, considering you have to get the airport early, go through security, and do all that. So that's kind of my big travel tip, is there are many ways to get from point A to point B. So don't limit yourself based on kind of what you know. Which kind of leads me to Alex's travel tip number 4. Explore a city on foot and take the local transportation. This, I think, is more of a personal travel tip. I know Ryan relates to this quite a bit, but for me, I personally think the best way to really see a city is on foot. I remember the first time I started like tracking my steps on a trip, I had gone to Stockholm with my sister. I think I walked 16 miles in one day.
Wow.
And I walked all day, but it was so cool because I really felt like I got a good feel of the city. The other thing too is a lot of cities, I mean, I'm thinking mainly European cities because that's kind of what I know the most, will have really great public transportation.
Yep.
If you're in London, you can get anywhere taking the tube, their like underground subway system, or a bus. And it's going to be way cheaper and usually faster than a taxi. So my absolute favorite way to see a city is basically just to get a Metro card for the day and stay on my feet, hop on a train or hop on a like local tram or a little underground subway car or a local bus. And I found that I can cover so much more ground and feel like I've actually been a part of a city doing it that way, as opposed to kind of being in and out of taxis or Ubers the entire time. The other part of that is be creative. Like when I was on a trip with some friends and we had 24 hours in Kyoto, Japan. And one of my friends was like, hey, you want to just rent an electric bike and bike around the city for a day? And I was like, that's a brilliant idea. Why have I never even thought of this? And so we just hopped on some bikes, grabbed some helmets, and saw the entire city, all of the things that we wanted to see, all of the districts that, would have taken forever to walk to and, maybe weren't as accessible via tram. We just hopped on bikes.
Nice.
And it's one of my favorite memories of traveling with friends, was just looking at a map saying, all right, let's go there. Just pedaling our way there. Another thing that was a real big missed opportunity for me was I was on the same time I was in Stockholm, I was walking past a group of like 5 guys who were basically preparing to launch their boat. It was like a restaurant on a boat where they cooked burgers and there were tables and people could go like eat on the boat. Think of just like a street cart or a food truck, but just
it's a
on
boat?
the water. Yeah.
That's
And so they were
cool.
like packing up for the day. I started talking to them. I'm like, wait, this is a burger boat. This is brilliant. You can just roll up to anywhere on the river and start flipping burgers. And they're like, yeah, well, we're headed this way. You want to hop on board and come with us and have some burgers? And I couldn't, because I had to meet my sister at a specific time and we didn't have cell coverage, so it would have freaked her out. But like even things like that, I think are so fun and such fun ways to like consider looking at a city. Like I know Chicago has an awesome like architecture boat tour where you like go on a boat up and down the river and they'll like point at architectural things on the water. And it's actually one of the top rated things to do in Chicago. So I would say as you're exploring a city, like be creative on ways that you can see the city, and whether it is renting bikes or hopping on some stranger's burger boat, like there are more ways to see a city, and I think the more creative you are, the more like interesting stories will come out of it.
You just love the burger boat?
The stranger's burger boat was so
know,
goodness.
sometimes you just gotta hop on a stranger's burger boat.
Sometimes.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, so that takes me to Alex's travel tip number 5. Don't be an influencer, but make sure to take photos. So I think there's definitely a balance that I would always encourage people to strike between making sure that you're taking great photos of wherever you are for the memories. Um, but too often, I think I see people living their vacations behind the screen of a phone
Mm.
or, a camera. And I know how excited people tend to be to kind of show off, not even show off, just to share their vacation with friends on Snapchat or Instagram or you name it. And I think my heart breaks a little bit when people get to the end of a vacation and feel like they haven't actually experienced the place they've been because it's all been from behind their phone. So that's kind of my big encouragement is like, don't spend your entire vacation behind the phone. Like, put your phone in your pocket for a while and like see the sights, smell the smells, find someone to talk to. The experiences that I've had of being able to like interact with locals always came when I was kind of open to it. People never come up and try and start a conversation with me when I'm behind my phone.
Mm.
So I think just being open to that opens people to possibilities. And another thing with that is like, offer to take photos for strangers.
Yes.
Like, I love that. When you do, be sure to take a quick selfie before you take a couple photos of them, though.
Wait, on their phone or on your phone?
On their phone, 100% on their phone. Offer to take a photo of them. Grab their phone as you like pretend like you're trying to figure it out. Pop a quick selfie, take a couple of photos of them, hand it to them, and then walk away. And usually like 10-15 seconds later, you'll just hear this roarous laugh behind you as they realize what mischief you have just
Oh,
done.
I love that.
And I like little things like that. I think are so fun.
I need to jump in with advice for anyone taking strangers' photos, though. I'm a photographer, so like I need to share this. So unless you're Alex, it's all digital. Alex with the film camera. And so take a lot for them. And take it like step forward, get a closer one, step back, get a further one, and maybe a vertical and a horizontal. Like, give them some options. And I've just found sometimes if I ask someone else to take our photo, they're so far away. And there's times when it's like, okay, I kind of want to be in the foreground and then have the cool background, but I don't need like 6 feet below my feet. And it's just... So I think giving people options and then letting them see it and see if they like it. And then, saying like, do you like that? Do you want me to take another one? Is really nice as well.
Yeah. Well, and like, that some people are like, oh, I want to use this on my dating profile. So you got to get that like nice close-up shot. But then they also usually have something like really great behind them. So you want to get that nice wide shot to see it all.
Totally.
It's like, give them options. And usually that starts kind of fun conversations as well. So if you're looking to have, especially if you're traveling solo and just looking for human interaction, offer to take someone's photo, and I'm sure that you'll get a little bit of that. But yeah, so that kind of is my main thing. It's like, I would encourage people to not spend their entire vacation behind a phone. And also, and everyone does this a little bit differently. This is why it's my tips and not everybody's tips. But like, I would encourage people not to completely shape their vacation around the photo ops they want to get. Because, yes, 1 or 2 photos could be good, but like I know people who really want to go someplace just because it's like a cool photo opportunity, which I'm not opposed to. But if it takes away from like other things that are a little bit more, I guess, substantial, then maybe it's not worth it.
Yeah, unless it's a photography trip. If like that's the whole reason for the trip, that's one thing. I mean, and I don't know, maybe these are just my scarred memories from childhood, but like the number of times we'd have to stop as a kid on like a road trip and get out and take a picture. Like, no, it's not fun. That's not the point. Pictures should be, now you're going to get my real strong bias. Pictures should be capturing the things that you are experiencing, not the motivation for the experience.
That's fair. But here's my second part of this is you have to make sure to take photos, period. A
Yep.
lot of times I myself get so obsessed with, not obsessed. I think I like to kind of blend in. I don't like to be a tourist. I like to kind of go with the flow of things. And one of the things for me that is like a big standout is when someone's like, okay, guys, the kids, let's get in front of the Leaning Tower of Pisa and take a photo. It's like, that's my tourist voice, if you didn't catch on to that. It's like, that's kind of a very like, oh, this guy's totally a tourist. And I think because I've kind of leaned more heavy into the wanting to blend in, I've missed out on some really cool moments that I probably should have taken photos of. So that's the point, is don't try and be an influencer and spend your entire vacation just behind a phone, but don't be that person who's too cool for photos, because the moment your mom asks you to take a photo, the answer is always, of course, mom, because she will cherish that photo forever. It'll make the family Christmas card. And even if you're doing it way more than you think you should, like, it's good to have those memories. And for people like me, who am super forgetful, going through like even an iPhone photo album will jog a lot of fond memories that I would otherwise would have lost. So that leads me to Alex's travel tip number 6. Find something to collect.
Oh,
we
no.
have already talked about like Starbucks mugs and, beer glasses, but something that I would encourage is for everyone to have something to collect. Whether it's like small, like a little fridge magnet that you can get from the countries you go to or the cities you go to, or it's giant, like I collect like country flags, which are really, really big and take up.
Alex, how many different things do you collect?
Way too many. So let me give you some examples of things that I've collected over the years. Country flags, I think were really great. Beer glasses from the different pubs, breweries, cities I went to. And a lot of times people even have, if there's like a unique soda or cola, they'll have cola glasses. Or I guess if you're a wine lover, maybe there's wine glasses or wine corks, or but for me, it's beer glasses with the name of the beer, which is usually has the city on it. I collect like country scarves, like you would see at like soccer, football matches. Currency. Oh, I think foreign currency is so cool. Like coins and bills. I collect rocks because sometimes if you are at like a really cool beach or like at an important, like, it's not like if you're on a tour at like a concentration camp or something, like they're not selling stickers in the gift shop, but if you want like something to take, like you can bring a rock home. And I don't even know if you're supposed to, so maybe I shouldn't be advocating this, but like, it's not always super appropriate, or not everything you do will have a gift shop. So if you collect like sand from the beaches that you like, or rocks from like places that have significance to you, that's like, when I went to do earthquake relief stuff in Nepal, like I had picked up a rock from one of like the temples that had fallen, and like that to me was like the most, I guess, precious thing I could take home, was kind of that memory of how like there was like so much destruction and heartbreak. And it's not like I'm going to like the temple gift shop to be like, oh, let's remember how this temple once was. So I don't know, some places aren't necessarily the best, or it depends how you travel. But if you're going to beaches, maybe you collect sand. If you're going to drink around the world, maybe you collect wine corks.
But Alex, don't you also collect things like boarding passes?
Yes, I also collect boarding passes. Yes, I also collect Starbucks mugs. I think that's it, though. I collect a lot of things. Someday I'm probably going to have to parse through it and find the things that are most important. But the point is I think it's important for everyone to have something to collect. And I would encourage it to be kind of the same thing, you know, stickers, magnets, bottle openers. I think one of my grandparents collected like thimbles, which are like really small and you can get them at a lot of gift shops. But it's just a cool way to remember the places that you've been, that is kind of like uniform, you know? You got a
Mhm.
bunch of magnets on your fridge, like that's a really cool thing. You got a bunch of boarding passes in your drawer, maybe not as cool. Find out what's good for you.
Or just do
So,
them all like Alex.
or, you know, just do them all, telling yourself, oh, yeah, as soon as I figure out what I really want to do, I'll get rid of the rest of these. And then I'm still figuring it out, Ryan. Still figuring it out. Okay, which brings me to Alex's travel trip number 7. Set expectations before you leave with a travel buddy. This is kind of an actual more like serious one. Is a lot of times I found that people go into a trip with completely different expectations of what the trip is going to be. And so sometimes the time to have this conversation is before booking a trip. Sometimes the conversation might, you know, if you're on a work trip or something and you know that you're going to have a couple extra days in a city, like then you have the conversation after you book the trip. But definitely, I would encourage doing it before you leave. Um, having a conversation, some things that are important are budget expectations. You know, if one person is expecting to go and eat out at fancy restaurants every day, and another person is like, yeah, man, I need to go to the grocery store and get some bread and peanut butter because that's going to be my meals for this trip. You're going to have some tough times and some tough expectations. So that's budget is a huge thing to talk about so that then you can all both be working together, or all, depending on however many, kind of towards a shared goal. Another one is like time expectations. Some people are crazy and love waking up at 4 a.m. to hop on a bus. Like other people will have none of that. And so it's important to kind of talk through what a day will look like or what you want a day to look like. I think I had a work trip with 2 coworkers. We went to Guam, and then on the way back, we basically had a 3 or 4 day layover in Tokyo. And so I was super excited. And I just was like, great, every moment of every day, we're going to do something and go here and see that and ride Mario Karts and eat at a cat cafe and eat at an owl cafe and then go to the bathhouse. And it got to a point where one of my travel companions, I like woke up and I was like, all right, today's the day we're doing all this. And he's like, Alex, I'm taking the day off. I am going to sleep. I am going to sit and drink a nice cup of coffee slowly. I'm going to find a gym and work out. And then I'll join you guys when I'm done with that. And it was a very good realization for me that just because Alex wants to do things a certain way doesn't mean that everybody's on board with that, and doesn't mean that that's the right way to do things. And so I've learned since to have a conversation before I go with the people that I'm considering going with, or, you know, work has determined that I go with. And it just, once you can talk through those things and kind of come up with a shared thing, some people want to be in museums all day. The other people would want to be out, I don't know, walking in nature all day. Like once you kind of have at least some sort of shared vision or conversation about what you want to do, then it really sets you up for success when you travel. So I don't know, have you guys ever had mismatched travel buddies in your past?
I don't know about mismatched travel buddies, but definitely figuring out those expectations, I agree, is super important and can sometimes be tricky because I don't think we always know what our expectations are ahead of time.
Hmm.
Right? Like you've done enough traveling with enough different people. I think you've kind of identified what those things are for you. But even you mentioned, when the first time you recognized it, like prior to that, you didn't really, it just didn't occur to you. And so I think for a lot of us, when we're traveling, if we've not had to travel with a particular person before, just like you run into other cultures, and when you run into another culture, all of a sudden you see things that you thought were just everybody, but actually is part of your culture. I think the same thing can happen even just between people and travel, where you just assume, oh, people plan this way. And then until you run into someone who doesn't plan that way, you're like, oh, well, I guess not everybody plans that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think part of traveling with people is also learning what those things are to have those conversations about.
Yeah, that's huge. Cheryl, have you ever gone with a kind of travel buddy who had completely different travel style than you?
Yeah, my husband.
Well, and your stepson.
And my stepson. Yeah, we're figuring it out. And it's good for me. He likes to go slower and do less. And I just keep going. I think like I can relate to your style a lot, and then have realized that I also need some rest when I'm traveling, and to take care of myself and go slower and enjoy a little bit more, which for me I think is looking like going a little slower. So it's really good for me, but it kind of goes against my natural. So I get him to like do more and get out more and everything, and then he gets me to slow down and take care of myself. So there's kind of a balance in the middle that's really cool, but left to our own devices, we're pretty different people.
It sounds like you're really good for each other.
Yeah, we have very important things that we need to learn from each other. So
That's good. Well, speaking of another important thing that I've gotten to learn, that brings me to Alex's travel tip number 8. Get some sort of credit card devoted to travel. So there are a ton of credit cards out there right now, and whenever you travel, there are a lot of credit cards that will have your back in many different ways. So my recommendation is, if you are going to travel, I would encourage applying for a credit card that will give you benefits such as no, international fees. A lot of times cards, if you go international, will charge a 1, 2, or 3% fee on any transaction, but a lot of cards won't, especially the travel cards. Some cards will give you free rental insurance. I was on a shoot in Iceland, and we needed a rental car, and I went to the rental car spot and I looked at the list of like 8,000 different types of renter insurance that they want you to have. But I had a good travel card. I gave them a call real quick, and they're like, oh yeah, that's included in our policy. As long as you rent the rental card on this car, then you do not have to buy any of their billion flavors of insurance. Just give us a call when something happens and we got you. And I was like, oh, that's really nice. Another time, an airline had lost my bags. And so I called, I had used this specific credit card to book the flight. I gave them a call, and they're like, oh, your bags are lost. Yeah, go ahead and buy some clothes. We'll give you I think it was either $50 or $100 per day just to buy clothes and keep them, and we'll just reimburse that expense. So there are a ton of cards out there that will do actually quite a bit for you, and who you can call. And a lot of them will have included like trip cancellation. If you get sick, or if a loved one gets sick and you can't travel anymore, like they'll refund whatever change fees or charges an airline will give you. So there's, I always will recommend this with a huge helping of salt. Like, if credit cards aren't necessarily for all people. Like, I know people who have gotten into a lot of trouble with credit cards, but if you're able to responsibly use credit cards, I would recommend getting one that has great travel benefits and perks, as well as a lot of these cards will have great like mileage things. For instance, if you get an American Airlines credit card, the one I have was like, okay, spend $4,000 on this card in 3 months and we'll give you 50,000 miles into your American Airlines account, which, is basically 2 domestic round trip tickets. So if you're already spending, $4,000 in 3 months, to be able to get a credit card and get 2 free round trips out of it is great. So, there are blogs and blogs and blogs devoted to travel credit cards, and you can go way down that path. But, if you are going to be traveling, I would encourage to get some sort of travel credit card where they will have your back. And you don't have to pay international fees. And you can use your credit card in other countries pretty easily. And if something happens during the trip, they have some sort of trip protection, because it's just nice to know that someone has your back. And if you're going to be spending the money anyways and can do it responsibly, you might as well do it with those kind of benefits and guarantees at your back. So, I've done a lot of research over the years. I'm not going to pitch what cards I think are right, but you can always hit up the show and they'll, I'm sure, hit up the Take Me With You podcast and we'll get back to your questions on travel cards, I'm sure. So that brings me to Alex's travel tips number 9. Use Google Maps to your advantage. The biggest number one thing that has been helpful to me through the last years of traveling is using pins and hearts in Google Maps. So if you go to Google Maps on your phone and click a destination or a restaurant or anything, you're able to, here, I'm just going to do it right now so I can get the exact thing.
Yeah, but the software is going to update and then it's going to be different. So
true. You can basically click the save. There's a button that says save, and then you can kind of create lists of things. And 2 of your default lists are want to go and favorites. So whenever anybody gets back from a vacation from anywhere in the world, I sit them down and I say, okay, if I were to be going to Bratislava, like, what things did you do there that I cannot miss? And then I pull up my Google Maps, and as they tell me the restaurant I have to go to, I put a pin in there with want to go. And in the description, I say, so-and-so said that these guys have the best halushki in Bratislava. And it's like, great. So over the years, I have been collecting all of this data from all of my friends who have gone around. And now my Google Maps is just completely cluttered with it. But it's great because anytime I go to a city, I already will have recommendations from people who have been there before. So the other part of that is if I go somewhere that I particularly love, I put it as a heart so that anybody who says, oh, Alex, COVID stinks, I'm going to go to Croatia. Do you have any recommendations in Dubrovnik? I can just whip out the Google Maps and be like, boom, I'm going to give you 4 spots that absolutely rocked. So that's kind of the way that I use the pins and the saved locations in Google Maps. And you can create your own lists. Like when I was going to Dubrovnik, I created the Game of Thrones locations list where I put all of those in. And so then if I was ever walking around, I could see where they were. The reason why this is huge to me is sometimes when you're in the middle of a travel day, you kind of will be done with all that you had planned. And you kind of have this question is oh, well, what should I do next? Or where should I go to lunch? If you do kind of a lot of research this way and talk to people this way and pin the things on your map, it's super easy to pull it up and just see what's close to you. So then instead of, having to spend the time to do the research or, say, oh, well, there's this one place that I heard about that's way across town. You can continually just be collecting all of this data from everybody that you talk to. And you can see so clearly what's close by. The other part of Google Maps, which is awesome, is you can like download maps to your phone. So if you're at a place where you don't have cell coverage, you can download specific, like, I guess, chunks of maps. So even, if you're at the hotel or hostel Airbnb, you can use your Wi-Fi, download the map. Then when you're walking around, you don't have to use super expensive data, and you can still see the maps, see where you are, and see the places you want to go. So yeah, I could not recommend using these pins more, because I now, first off, it feels cool that when anyone's like, hey, do you have recommendations in this foreign city? Like, if anybody I know has been there, I have recommendations to give based on people that I trust. And similarly, like, when I was like trying to rack my brain for a story with the Take Me With You podcast, I was able to go and see all of the hearts along the way that I dropped pins at to say, oh, that's right, I totally remember that being awesome. So use Google Maps. It is awesome. And with that, whenever someone gets back from a trip, ask them the places they'd go. Like, grill them. Be like, no, what was the restaurant name? Like, you must tell me. So, well, that's number 9, which brings me to Alex's travel tip, number 10. Talk to locals, be a local. I think one of the coolest things that I've learned over my years of traveling is that a lot of the things that you'll read on, the top 10 things to do in this city are good, but it's not always the complete list. It doesn't always give you a complete picture of a city. And so one of the things that I always try to do is, and which is why I usually use Airbnb, is like talk to locals who can tell you. I mean, it was even in your guys' list or in your 100th episode, one of the favorite ways that you've asked locals is like, or that you ask locals for good restaurant recommendations. And I might be misquoting, but where would you take your sweetie to like a nice dinner?
Yeah.
Was that it? Yeah. I thought that was brilliant.
Yes.
And so like going to people who have lived in a city and asking questions like that, or like, hey, what I like to do is like, what's the best meal you had out last month? Because for them, like, they're not necessarily going to all of these like, touristy spots, but they're going to go to the places that they like.
Yeah.
And I want to eat what locals like, not what locals think tourists will want to see.
Yep.
So that's where I always try and start my kind of planning, or on the day, figuring out what I want to do next is, whether it's a family that you're helping take a photo, which actually usually isn't going to be locals, but sometimes they're people who have been there for a while. Airbnb hosts, hotel concierges, or just like your waiter at a restaurant or your server at a bar. Like, a lot of people have kind of ideas of where they would go and what they want to see, and like, that's pretty cool. So I always try and ask, where should I go? Like, what should I see? But also I think it's really important to ask what to avoid. Like, there are sometimes bad parts of town, or like scammers that go around and, want to do, whether it's, pickpocketers or people in certain bars, or people who, I don't know, will try and scam you into getting into their taxi, or like, I don't know what the scam is in every city, but a lot of times the locals will. And so kind of making sure that you ask, where should I go? Ask where I should not go. And then like, it's kind of cool too to give them a chance to like flex a little bit, where it's like, oh, this is my favorite restaurant, and like, and I know the owner. It's like, great, what's the owner's name? And so then you like go to the restaurant and you're like, oh, is Andre here? Andre, hey, I'm staying with Miha right now. He told me to come by. Like, he sends his regards, and all of a sudden it's like there's free drinks on your table. Like, it's super cool. It's super fun. And it like, a lot of the people that I've like met and talked with, like they really enjoy that opportunity to kind of be able to show off their town a little bit and get excited for you.
That's cool.
So that brings us to the plus one. And this isn't one that I think is like necessary, like has to be on the top 10 list, but I think it's really important. And that's treat yourself. A lot of times, especially for younger people, you're like on a budget, you're like traveling around, and you're like, oh man, is it like, can I afford McDonald's or Subway today? And it's like people are like really balling on a budget. And I think there's something so important to that, like so that you can travel more. But every now and then there arises an opportunity where it is not the time to be frugal. It is the time to treat yourself. And I think of one specific time, one of the most I look back on it as one of my biggest regrets in life. I had an awesome work trip. We were in Zimbabwe. We went to Victoria Falls. We just crossed over to Zambia. Gorgeous, gorgeous day, gorgeous time. And they were like, hey, let's go bungee jumping. And so pretty much everybody else went bungee jumping at Victoria Falls. And I didn't want to pay the $100 to go bungee jumping. Because at the time I thought, meh, it's not worth it. I look back at how many times I like have regretted not just doing it, because yes, $100 is a lot of money, especially for somebody young. But the one opportunity I might ever have to go bungee jumping at Victoria Falls is just worth way more than I think I gave it value to. So I think when you're traveling and there comes a time where maybe you're just really, really burnt out, like go get a massage, spend 20, 30, 40 bucks, or if you've been staying in hostels and you just really can't share a bedroom with anyone else, like go get a hotel room for a night. Like travel should be enjoyable. And if you're hitting a point where you're so concerned about the money that you're not enjoying it, or you are saying no to opportunities that you might later regret, like that's not necessarily the time. Don't be irresponsible, but treat yourself every now and then. So those are my 10 plus one travel tips. And now I turn the floor over to the two of you. I am very fascinated to hear the travel tips that you have from personal experience.
Well, I don't know if we've had enough time to think of two travel tips.
Oh no, I forgot mine. I should have written mine down.
I wrote mine down. So I'll go first because I did write mine down.
That sounds good.
And actually I joked about how we didn't have enough time, but it actually took me probably 3/4 of the time to come up with my second tip. So
really?
Because that's just I'm slow. Okay. So my first travel tip is know yourself. And so that can look a lot of different ways. Are you the type of person that wants to travel super fast or slow? Do you want to be really, really planned? Do you want to be spontaneous? And actually, these are continuums. It's not an either or, right? Like, where do you fall on these continuums, right? Do you really want to do all of the top touristy things? Or would you really rather go off the beaten path and see things that most people don't see? Like, what do you enjoy doing? Like, just what do you enjoy when you travel? And sometimes you don't know those things until you've tried them, right? So some of that you have to learn by doing and by traveling, but the better you know yourself, the more you're going to enjoy the trips that you take. So that's my first one. And then my second one is use what you're into to frame your travel experiences. We've talked about this on the podcast before, but I'm a science guy. I love science. So when I travel, I look for the science-related things in the places that I go. And the more that I've done that, the more I've discovered there's sciencey stuff all over the world in all sorts of places. Now, it's not always the stuff that's easy to find, because that, like, art and history are the two things that most travel things are related to usually, right? Like if it's a travel book or, TripAdvisor or the top 10 sites, they're usually related to history or art, which is fine. Art can be interesting to me. History is very rarely interesting to me. It can be, but often it's not. But those are the big ones. I love science, but there are science things all over the place. I talked about the Einstein Museum already, right? Like you can find the thing that you're into. You can probably find something related to it in most of the places you'd want to go. You just might have to dig a little bit. And so find those things that you're into and fuse that into your travel. And I think that'll give you an extra layer of enjoyment in your travels.
I dig that. I like the know thyself. That's like so big. Like, I think I'm going to stall to give Cheryl a little bit more time to
No,
think.
that's fine.
Um,
Well, I really liked your expectations one, actually. I mean, I think expectations just in life in general are super important, but I think it's related to the know yourself.
yeah.
It's kind of like the other side of it, right? Like know yourself and then be aware of others and then try to sync those up.
Yeah. It's two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times, especially early when I would want to travel, I would like kind of want to live or set my itinerary on what I thought the best itinerary should be
Mm-hmm.
for a traveler, where it's like, oh yeah, of course you have to do this, 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 and this. But I never thought, do I want to do all of those things?
Yeah.
Like, what would be most enjoyable to me?
Right.
And I think that's such a big thing.
Yeah. Because sometimes it is those major travel attractions, right? Sometimes I've discovered sometimes those are the things that I want to see. Like, yeah, I do want to see that thing or go to that place or do this super touristy thing. And then there's other times where it's like, yeah, no, I have zero interest in that particular touristy thing. Or like, here's an example, like the Louvre, right? When I went to the Louvre in Paris, I saw the big three. I'm good. Like, I don't need to go back to the Louvre. If I was going in a group, sure, I would go. And there's lots of art and there's a lot that I could, enjoy there. But like, I saw the Mona Lisa. We've talked a bunch on the podcast about how disappointing it is, right? Saw the Winged Victory of Sam and Thrace and saw Venus de Milo. Those were cool. And there was a bunch of other just lots and lots and lots and lots of paintings. I just don't know enough about art to really know the difference, beside the fact that, wow, that's cool. I could never do that. So it's like, I've seen as enough for me to appreciate it. And I don't need to spend multiple days at the Louvre, because apparently you can. Apparently it's so big. You could, like, it would take multiple days to see all of the things that are there, which is cool. But that sounds terrible to me.
It's a lot.
Okay, I have mine.
Oh, perfect.
These are not necessarily like my top two, but I was trying to think of ones that I haven't already shared on the podcast.
Yeah.
Like, I can always tell people to pack light and to take a food tour.
Yep.
But I'm going to say some other ones. So what I wanted to say for one is, don't schedule an hour-long layover. You need a longer layover than 1 hour, which is very specific. So I think you could broaden that to, like, don't always assume that everything's just going to work out, and think about what you're going to do if those things don't work out. And so, and it depends on how much of a planner you are, how easy that is for you. But an hour layover is fine if your first flight lands on time, and if the airport isn't super crowded, or if you don't have to go through customs or security in that airport. But if any of those things happen, all of a sudden, it's amazing how quickly an hour can get eaten up. When you think, I'm in the same building, you just have to walk over there. And it's so much more than that sometimes. And so I don't like scheduling like a 3 or 4 hour layover in a facility, because it feels like a waste of time. And I'm like, I just want to get there quicker and start my trip. But I think it's wise, and so I think kind of thinking about those aspects in other areas of planning your trip is really smart too. Of, okay, well, what if this thing doesn't work? Do I have an idea of what a backup would be for whatever it is? So that's one.
That's an awesome one.
And then I don't know quite how I want to say this, but essentially be yourself when you're traveling, but also try to experience local culture. So I think that some people can be rigid with their expectations of, when I travel, I always rent a car. And so I was having a conversation with someone who was planning a trip to Italy with her husband, and she was talking about renting a car for the whole time, including like when they're in the cities. And I was just like, oh my gosh, no, don't do that. Like, they have a great metro in Rome, or like things like that. And I was like, and really, do you want to be like driving through these cities? And then also, I agree with you, Alex. It's like, walk, go enjoy, look at the buildings and be on the sidewalks and everything. And so that's something where maybe in your daily life you drive everywhere, but go experience what makes sense in that culture, in that city, wherever you are. Don't just be like, well, this is how I do it, and so this is how I'm going to do this. But on the flip side of that, I think it's cool to figure out, like what Ryan was saying, kind of like, what do I enjoy and how could I enjoy that in this space? So we had a guest on who even said like she likes to sit and drink coffee, and I think she said draw or something like that. And so she goes and does that when she's traveling. Or like one time, I got a massage on a trip because it was like, this sounds great and this is vacation, And so I think it's like trying to find, who am I and what do I enjoy? But then how can that morph and be a part of this culture so I can experience this culture and how people live life here too. So find that happy medium, maybe.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Okay, I think I'm going to pull things in a little bit from our top 15, I guess, list.
14 plus 1.
14 plus 1. Okay. And pull us back to our regularly scheduled podcast. And now back to our regularly scheduled podcast. And we're going to do Wish You Were Here. So during this, each of the three of us is going to share a quick little travel attraction of just a cool highlight or a restaurant or a thing. Think of it like a little postcard that you would send home, that Alex has actually sent me quite a few of the places he's been. Says, hey, this thing's really cool. I don't remember if you've actually said Wish You Were Here or not, but I still have some of them, I think, sitting over there. So think of it like that. Is you're a cool place. You had the cool experience. As a matter of fact, I think I have at least one from Dubrovnik when you were there. Now that I think about it, you sent me a postcard. So
I sent it to the podcast, Ryan.
Oh, sorry, to the podcast, care of me. So Cheryl, what would you like to do for your Wish You Were Here?
Well, Ryan, you're going to be really happy about this one because it's kind of science-y.
Oh, really?
Yes, and it's one that's like a current part of my life as well, and I realized I should share on the podcast.
I'm excited now.
Is what you should do is off of the I-90 freeway in Washington, when you're heading from Seattle to, you're driving east, and right before you get to Snoqualmie Pass, you're going to get off on exit 47, and you're going to go to Humpback Mountain Trailhead and go rock hounding there.
Rock hounding?
Do you know about rock hounding?
I don't. What is rock hounding?
It's just going and digging for rocks. But like there's a community online that posts about where you can find like a geode or these different things. And at the Humpback Mountain Trail, you can find crystals. They grow in the ground a lot in this one section there, about half a mile in. And I've gone like 5 times now with my husband, and most of the time with my stepson as well. And we go and dig in the ground and find crystals. And it's so cool. And there's other people out there.
That's cool.
So it'd be so weird if I was thinking if I went on that hike and didn't know what it was about, because all of a sudden you come to this area where there's just like people like spread out through this hillside, and they're all pretty quiet because they're doing their own thing and digging. But it would be kind of alarming if you didn't know it was there. But it's fun. I really enjoy it, and we found some like decent sized crystals, but then people are posting online regularly that they're finding like pretty big ones right in that area. And so yeah, we've been learning more about it. We just got a new like sifter for it.
Wow, you're like a serious rock hounder now.
That's hardcore.
It's pretty fun because I like the hiking, and I mean I think it's fun to look for things, but then yeah, Daryl's really into the rock aspect of it. So it's pretty cool. So find rock hounding in your area, but if you're over here in the Seattle area, that's a place you can dig for crystals.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool.
You look so surprised.
I am super surprised. Alex, what would you like to do for your wish you were here?
Well, Ryan, for my wish you were here, I'm going to take you to a beautiful day in the dead of winter in Stockholm. Snow is falling. So snow is falling. It's about 25 degrees outside Fahrenheit. But there's some awesome Christmas markets in Stockholm. And my postcard would be from one particular, there's like a park called Skansen, which I think during the year is like I think it's a zoo. And it's kind of still a zoo in the winter, but they've converted much of it into a Christmas market. And so you can go and get all of the meats and the cheeses and the herring. And what we did is we got mulled wine, which I think they call glögg in Sweden. And so you get a nice cup of glögg, and they had a St. Lucia concert in one of the churches, which is kind of their Christmas traditional story of, man, it was all in Swedish, so I didn't understand all of it, but the gist is there is a patron saint, St. Lucia, who is part of their Christmas tradition, and they have a lot of, I unfortunately, I don't know the whole story, but
Santa Lucia, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah.
They like wear the
you might wear the wreath with the kid.
They wear the wreath on the head.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
And so my wish you were here was sitting in the church at the Christmas market, drinking glögg and watching the St. Lucia performance with like a live choir.
Nice.
In a beautiful, snowy, freezing day at Christmas time in Stockholm.
Lovely.
So that's me. What about you, Ryan? What's your wish you were here moment?
So this one, I actually, in my head, I figured that we had already shared about, but I can't find it on our spreadsheet anywhere. So, and that is Fort Casey State Park on Whidbey Island. If
nice.
You guys are both like nodding because obviously if you are not from this area, just near Seattle, we've got quite a few islands out in Puget Sound. One of them is Whidbey Island, which is really narrow but very, very long. And there's actually technically 3 forts, 2 of them on Whidbey Island and one of them over on the peninsula, that form sort of a triangle that was supposed to protect Puget Sound in times of war, to prevent ships from coming in all the way down into like Seattle and Olympia and kind of the more populated areas. But Fort Casey, at least, has been turned into a state park. And it's really, really cool because it's kind of in the side of this hill that overlooks the sound. And so there's all sorts of bunkers and rooms and stairs and old guns, and you can climb around and walk through the old rooms. And it's super, super beautiful. There's lots of places you can walk around and see. It's very scenic. And it's just kind of a fun place to go and hang out. And you can spend a little bit of time there. You could spend a bunch of hours there. They got huge green grass areas. You can, play active sportsy things for people who like to do those sorts of things.
Sportsy.
Yeah, active sportsy things. I don't know what they would be. That's not me. I'd rather just sit or walk. I don't really want to like be active and sportsy, but it's really, really cool. So I would definitely say Fort Casey on Whidbey Island near Seattle.
Nice.
That's a great one.
Yeah.
Also, for the record, you guys have had to do this so many times. I am astounded, and I hold you both in very high regards for being able to come up with 106.
Yep.
Well, we haven't done them for every episode. There are some episodes that we haven't done them on for different reasons.
But
And
probably still around 100 that we've
probably
done. Yeah.
Probably near 100. And it's become significantly harder, especially for me with COVID, because I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Cheryl's still going places, local places, but she's still going and experiencing new things. Whereas I've like had to kind of go back and see, okay, what are the things I haven't talked about yet? Because I'm not really going very many new places these days.
It's still fun. Very impressive. So just know that.
Oh, thank you.
Your creativity is noted.
Great.
Yeah, I'm just talking about digging in the ground for rocks at this point. So,
Hey, it's still cool.
Still very cool. Well, folks, and with that extremely, extremely long podcast, I think we are finally reaching the end. So, Alex, I'll go ahead and do the outro. Follow us at TimWe Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And as always, please feel free to send us any travel tips and family recipes at tmwypodcast@gmail.com. That's timwepodcast@gmail.com. As always, Ryan, Cheryl, it's been a pleasure. And do you have anything else you'd like to say before we wrap it out?
Well, they could also call us and leave us a voicemail at 406-763-8699. Or if it's easier to remember, that's 406-POD-TIMWE. We would also really appreciate it if people would rate and review our podcast, subscribe to make sure that they don't miss any episodes, and share our podcast so that other people can hear the really cool travel stories and amazing travel tips shared by our guest Alex this week.
As always, thank you to Beth Reed Miller for the awesome artwork. You can check out more of Beth's artwork at Beth Is Something.
And thanks, Erica Corbin, for the song Round the Globe.
You can listen to Erica's music wherever music is sold or streamed.
That's all we got for you this time. Thanks for sticking with us. Alex, thank you so much for having a very interesting and lively podcast episode yet again.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me and making this mistake once more.
Maybe in another 50 episodes, we'll make the mistake again. All right. Thank you, everyone, so much. Until next time, remember to take me with you.
Take me with you.
Take me with you.
Can we get a sailboat chasing down the sunset as we float round and round the globe? Salty air and balmy nights, guided only by the lights above, and a little love. All the world is out there waiting to explore, and all our troubles here wanting to be